I figured it out. I figured out what that mid-credit scene in Fantastic Four really meant. And I'm telling you right now, Avengers Doomsday is not just another multiversal flick. This is the movie. The one that will finally reset the board, break the formula, and maybe even give us an MCU that feels fresh again. And it all starts with a green cloak, a silver mask, and a little boy named Franklin Richards. Now, before we dive deep, I want you to sit with this thought. What if the greatest villain in the MCU wasn't Kang, wasn't Thanos, but someone we all thought was gone? What if the most dangerous man in the multiverse looks exactly like Tony Stark? Because that's what I believe we're heading toward. The Fantastic Four's mid-credit scene doesn't just tease the arrival of Dr. Doom, it hints at the resurrection of Marvel's most iconic actor, Robert Downey Jr., in a role so complex, so nuanced, and so devastating, it might completely rewire how we see him forever. This isn't some fun little cameo. This is a statement, a threat, a promise. The Fantastic Four movie itself, genuinely great. And I don't say that lightly. Marvel needed this to land, and they delivered. Gone is the clunky humor, the miscasting, the over-reliance on nostalgia. Instead, what we got was a team that felt authentic, smart, and emotionally grounded. Pedro Pascal brings the kind of weary intellect to Reed Richards that reminds us of Tony Stark in his darkest moments. Joseph Quinn surprises with a version of Johnny Storm that's not just hot-headed, but brilliant. Vanessa Kirby steals the show as Sue, and Ben Grimm is more than the guy in the orange rocks. He's the soul of the group. And the best part? They're all scientists. No one is comic relief. Every one of them feels like they belong in the story and in the universe. That's rare. But let's skip ahead. You're not here for a review. You're here because of that scene. The camera fades back into the Baxter building 4 years later. Franklin is 4 now. Innocent, curious, powerful beyond comprehension. And sitting across from him is Victor Von Doom, kneeling, unmasked, calm, not attacking, not gloating, just there, reaching out. It's a short scene, but I believe it reveals everything. I believe it cracks open the plot of Avengers Doomsday, and once you connect the dots, you'll see exactly what Marvel's building. Doom isn't there to threaten. He's there to persuade. Because he knows something nobody else does. Something about Franklin. Something about the universe. Something about what's coming next. And for once, he doesn't need to lie. He just needs to be patient. Now you're probably wondering, why Franklin? What makes this kid so special? Let me remind you what Galactus did. In the final act of Fantastic Four, Galactus showed up. Not as a storm cloud. Not as a voice in the sky. But as the real horrifying force from the comics. And what did he want? A trade. Earth. For the child. One child. One boy. Franklin. Let that sink in. Now Doom saw that. He studied that. He calculated the power it would take to make a being like Galactus reconsider, and then he started planning. Because Doom doesn't want to kill. Doom doesn't want to destroy. Doom wants to rule. And Franklin is the crown jewel. The key to everything. And that's why Doom appears calm, almost gentle in that mid-credit scene. He's not here to steal Franklin. He's here to convert him. Let's talk visuals for a second. In the main movie, the Baxter building is decorated in cool blues. Techno-elegant. Clinical. But in that mid-credit scene, it's orange. Warm. Inviting. Why? Because green, the color of Doom's cloak, pops against orange. It's complementary. It's a technique as old as cinema itself. Think Joker's green hair against his purple coat. Spider-Man's red against a blue skyline. It's not an accident. It's a signal. A signal that Doom is going to live in this space. That he will dominate it. Not with violence, but with presence. With ideology. With manipulation. And here's the twist. If Doom is allowed to walk freely through the Baxter building, that means the Fantastic Four trust him. Maybe not fully, but enough to let him in. Enough to listen. And that means Doom didn't break in. He was invited. That's huge. That changes everything. So what does he want? What's the goal? Simple. He wants Franklin to help him build Battleworld. If you've read Secret Wars 2015, you know what I'm talking about. Doom creates a patchwork planet made up of broken multiversal fragments. He rules it as a god. He holds it together using the power of Molecule Man. But in the MCU, we don't have Molecule Man. What we do have is Franklin Richards, a kid who can reshape reality, manipulate timelines, create life. Franklin is a literal god in the making. And Doom? Doom wants that power. Not to destroy, not to conquer, to rebuild on his terms. But here's the kicker. He's not dumb. He saw what happened when Galactus tried to take Franklin by force. It didn't work. Sue nearly broke the sky protecting her son. So Doom changes tactics. He plays the long game. He approaches with empathy, offers knowledge, warns them of the incursions, the multiversal collisions teased in Doctor Strange and the Marvels. He tells Reed and Sue, "Your universe is going to crash into another. I've seen it. I can help." And because he is a genius and he does know things Reed doesn't, they believe him, at least at first. This, I think, is the setup for Avengers Doomsday. The Fantastic Four and Doctor Doom working together temporarily to stop the end of their world. They travel to Earth 616, possibly using a modified version of the Excelsior spacecraft we saw earlier. And yes, in Thunderbolts we saw a different version of that ship. But remember, this is Reed Richards. He can upgrade. He can adapt. That's not a continuity error. That's a feature. Now here's where it gets messy. Somewhere along the way, Doom reveals his real plan. Maybe it happens halfway through the movie. Maybe it's the climax. But when it happens, it'll hit like a freight train. Doom doesn't just want to survive the multiverse collapse, he wants to reshape it. He wants to build a new world, a better world. One ruled by intellect, logic, power, and by him. And Franklin? Franklin is the engine, the battery, the god. But Doom knows how fragile trust is. So he doesn't abduct Franklin. He doesn't need to. He guides him, twists him, makes him believe, makes him choose Doom over his own family. And when the moment comes, when Franklin finally sides with Victor, that's when everything burns. Reed Richards? Shackled, powerless, watching his son and wife stand beside Doom with no memory of who he is. And Doom, clad in white, sitting on a throne in the center of Battleworld, not as a tyrant, but as a god. Now let's talk about that face. Victor Von Doom is famously scarred. His vanity destroyed him. In the comics, one scratch was all it took for him to believe he was hideous. But in the MCU, this Doom took off his mask. In front of a child. That's not something comic Doom would ever do. So why does it matter? Because this might not be the same Doom. This might be a version that never got disfigured. Or more importantly, it might be Tony Stark, or at least a man who looks like him. Because Anthony Russo confirmed that yes, Robert Downey Jr. is playing Doom, and that raises a million possibilities. What if Victor's identity, his appearance, his trauma are all part of a larger deception? In the Doom Quest storyline and the What If comics, we've seen versions where Doom and Stark share not just intelligence, but fate. In some universes, they're almost indistinguishable. What if the MCU leans into that? What if this Doom is obsessed with fixing the mistakes Tony made? With surpassing him? Or even replacing him? Not as Iron Man, but as something more. And let's not forget, Secret Wars is about memory, identity, broken timelines and shattered realities. The idea that the people we know may not even remember who they were. That's how Doom wins. Not through power, but through erasure. And that brings me back to that haunting image from the leaked concept art. Doom in white, Reed in chains, Sue and Franklin by Doom's side, and they don't remember. They don't know. They're just his. That's not just tragic. That's personal. That's how you elevate a story like this. You make it about more than just worlds colliding. You make it about family, about loss, about the cost of saving everything. And we haven't even talked about the X-Men yet. They're coming. We know they're coming. And they'll factor into Doomsday somehow. My guess? They're from a collapsing universe. Maybe even the 838 reality from Multiverse of Madness. Remember how Professor X died? Maybe they're Charles Xavier didn't. Maybe he saw the incursions coming, gathered the mutants, and sought refuge. Where? Battle World. Or maybe against Battle World. Doctor Strange is another wild card. He knows about incursions. He's seen the edge of the multiverse. In the comics, he becomes Doom's right-hand man during Secret Wars. Not because he agrees, but because he has no choice. Strange might end up being the last line of defense, or the first to fall. Either way, I'm certain he plays a pivotal role in Doomsday and the future of the multiverse. And that, my friends, is just the beginning. Strange knows Doom. Maybe not this specific version, but variants, patterns, intentions. He's seen what unchecked genius can become. And even though Strange himself has danced with darkness, Doom is different. Doom doesn't hesitate. He doesn't question. He believes. Completely. And that makes him the most dangerous being in the multiverse. Because when a man like Victor believes he's the answer, he stops listening to the question. Now, let's rewind just a bit, because there's something else about the mid-credit scene people are overlooking. When Franklin reaches out to Doom's face, it's not with fear. It's with recognition, familiarity. That look on Franklin's face wasn't just curiosity. It was comfort. And that changes the tone of everything. Doom didn't just walk in that day. He's been around, off-screen, building rapport, sowing seeds. And if Sue was gone, even briefly, perhaps during one of those secret space missions, it's possible Doom spent time with Franklin already. Secret visits, whispered stories, gentle guidance, slowly replacing Reed in the boy's subconscious. So when we see that moment in the penthouse, it's not the beginning. It's the reveal. The audience catches up to what Doom has already put in motion. But what about Sue? She's a powerhouse in this universe, visibly the strongest team member emotionally and physically. There's no version of this story where Sue would willingly give up Franklin or fall under Doom's spell, unless she didn't know she was doing it. And this, I believe, is where things get really tragic. Battle World won't be built with fire and war. It'll be built with loss, with manipulation, with love. Imagine Doom telling Franklin, "Your mother's in danger, I can save her, but I need your help." That's not a lie. That's a weapon. Because children don't need to be forced. They need to believe they're helping. And once Franklin opens that door, once his power starts shaping reality, it may already be too late to pull him back. You can already imagine the lines. "I'm doing this for you, Mom. He said you'd be okay." And Sue, with no memory, standing beside Doom, a queen unaware she was ever anything else. That's how you write stakes. That's how you make a villain truly terrifying, not just because he's powerful, but because he's right there, inside your home, wearing a mask you invited him to put on. So where are the Avengers in all of this? They're fractured, still recovering from the fallout of Kang Dynasty, trying to understand what the multiverse even means now. New teams are forming. Old wounds are barely healing. There's no central leader anymore. No one voice guiding them forward. That vacuum is what allows Doom to rise. Because Reed and Sue aren't calling the Avengers yet. They're trying to solve things themselves. Like always. Because Reed always thinks he has the solution. But Doom doesn't just outthink Reed, he outplays him. Every move is a checkmate before the board is even set. And if you're wondering if that sounds too ambitious, remember, this is Marvel's reset moment. This is the big one. The spiritual successor to Infinity War. The answer to those who say the MCU lost its soul. This is the story that doesn't just juggle characters, it breaks them, rebuilds them, realigns the entire mythology. But it's also deeply personal. This is a story about a father losing his family, a mother losing herself, a child losing his innocence, and a man, Victor Von Doom, losing his humanity even as he believes he's saving it. Now let's pull back again, just a little, because there's a growing theory that this Doom, the one played by RDJ, isn't just another universe's Victor. He's a remnant, a fragment of Tony Stark, corrupted by time, by temptation, by exposure to things no human mind should process. Think about it, Tony sacrificed himself at the end of Endgame. He snapped Thanos out of existence, but his consciousness could have survived, or maybe not survived. Maybe been reborn in another timeline. A timeline where the trauma of Ultron, Civil War, and his own God complex didn't lead to redemption, but to reconstruction. That's how you get Doom. Not a mask-wearing dictator, but a scientist who once believed he was a hero. A man who saw the multiverse fall apart and decided he had to fix it. Not by building suits, but by building realities. That adds layers to everything. Every interaction with Reed, every moment with Franklin, every line where he talks about mistakes or choices. Because he's not just talking about the collapse of universes, he's talking about himself. And here's the punch that will break fans. What if Franklin figures it out? What if, deep in Battleworld surrounded by lies, the boy begins to see pieces of the truth, echoes of Reed's voice, memories that don't belong? And what if, instead of fighting Doom with power, Franklin tries to redeem him? That could be the emotional core of Secret Wars. Not just smashing timelines together, but healing them. A child trying to save the man who replaced his father. That's poetry. That's weight. That's MCU at its most operatic. Now let's not forget another crucial layer, Latvaria. We've only seen hints, but the absence of Latvarian delegates at the future Foundation Assembly speaks volumes. This isn't just a hidden kingdom anymore. This is a place under siege. And Victor? He's not just the ruler. He's the last one who remembers what it used to be. Maybe he's even seen multiple Latvarias fall in multiple universes. That fuels his obsession. That fuels Battleworld. He's not trying to conquer the multiverse. He's trying to preserve the best versions of it. And that's where the mutants could come in. Imagine this. Doom reaches out to the mutants from other realities, offers them sanctuary, a world where they'll never be hunted, never be feared, a home. That makes him look like a savior, a liberator, not a dictator. And in some cases, maybe he is. There's power in that contradiction, in the idea that Battleworld is both prison and paradise. And that brings us to one of the boldest theories yet. What if Doom isn't the villain of Secret Wars? What if he's the tragic hero? Think of it. The Avengers want to restore reality, reset things, bring back what was. But Doom? Doom offers a world where no one dies, where the best pieces of every broken universe are stitched together, where heroes who died can live again. Tony, Nat, Steve, Logan, Wanda, all preserved, protected within Doom's design. And if you were Franklin Richards, wouldn't that sound right? Wouldn't that feel like hope? The line between hero and villain has never been thinner. And that's why this story will hit harder than anything since Endgame. Because it's not about power. It's about belief. What happens when the smartest people in the multiverse disagree about what saving the world even means? And you know who gets caught in the middle? Peter Parker. That's right. We know Spider-Man, Brand New Day is coming. And there's no way that movie doesn't tie directly into this. Because if anyone understands memory loss, reality resets, and the cost of magic, it's Peter. He already gave up his identity to save the world once. And when he sees Battleworld, When he sees a place where Aunt May is alive, where MJ knows him, where Uncle Ben never died, you better believe that temptation is going to cut deep. Spider-Man could be the moral compass of this saga, the one who remembers what it means to let go. And then there's Doctor Strange, possibly the only man who sees Battleworld for what it is. Who knows Doom's past, knows the price of tampering with reality. Maybe he's the one who finally snaps Franklin out of it. Or maybe he joins Doom, as he does in the comics. Because even Steven has his limits, his regrets. Imagine the standoff. Strange, Peter, Sue, and Reed trying to break through to Franklin. Doom standing tall, white cloak flowing, speaking softly. They don't understand, Franklin. They never will. And Franklin caught between two worlds, between two fathers. And just when it seems he might make the right choice, Doom shows him her, his mother, alive, safe, happy, in a world he helped create. That's the moment that breaks him. And that's the moment when Reed Richards finally realizes this fight isn't going to be won with science, or power, or strategy. It's going to be won with faith. Faith in family. Faith in truth. Faith that, even when everything falls apart, the right thing is still worth doing. Now let's address one last theory, the one nobody wants to talk about. What if Franklin doesn't survive? What if the only way to collapse Battleworld and restore reality is for Franklin to give up his power completely, to erase himself from existence, to undo the engine Doom used to build his new world? It's the ultimate sacrifice. A child giving up everything to stop the man who made him feel like a god. And Reed watching his son vanish to save the multiverse. That's the kind of ending that redefines the MCU. That shakes the foundation. That clears the board for a new era. One where the stakes matter again. Because if the most powerful being in Marvel gave everything up, not in battle, but in grace, how could anyone go back to punchlines and quips? That's what Avengers Doomsday could be. A soft reboot, yes, but also a funeral, a celebration, a rebirth. And Doom? Still out there, still watching, still believing he was right. That's how you set up the next saga. That's how you give the MCU a second wind. So yeah, we finally have a Fantastic Four that works. But more importantly, we have a villain who might just break the MCU wide open. Not with violence, but with vision. And I'll be honest, I hope they do it. Because this isn't just the setup for Avengers Doomsday. This is the return of Marvel's ambition. This is hope, twisted into something dangerous. This is the end and the beginning. But hope, when placed in the wrong hands, can become something monstrous. And that's what Avengers Doomsday ultimately represents. It's a study in control of what happens when even the best of us, the smartest, the most capable, decide they alone are worthy of shaping what comes next. That's the philosophy Victor Von Doom will carry into the MCU, that the multiverse needs a curator, not a savior, a designer, not a defender. And to many that might sound compelling. Remember, Doom will not enter this saga as a cackling villain. He will be composed, articulate, visionary. And that's going to divide the fan base in universe too. Some will rally behind him, especially those from broken universes. Survivors of incursions. People whose homes were lost in the madness of multiversal collapse. Imagine characters like Deadpool or even Magneto looking at Doom and saying, he's not wrong. That's where things get slippery. When your enemy starts making sense. When the pain becomes persuasive. Now this brings us to the role of the TVA. They were a central force in Loki, and we now know they've been working behind the scenes, trying to control the timelines. The sacred timeline is no longer sacred. And if anyone would be monitoring the rise of Doom, it's them. But here's the problem. They've already been fractured. Renslayer is missing. Kang's variants are destabilizing everything. And Loki, the last man holding the system together, is now trapped in a state of eternal watch. So what happens? Doom seizes the gap. That's what makes this story so compelling. It's not just about the Fantastic Four, or even the Avengers. It's about how all the systems we've relied on, the TVA, the sorcerers, the technology, the governments, fail. And in that void, Doom becomes the answer. He becomes inevitable. And what about Kang? Isn't he the big bad of the multiverse saga? That's the beauty of this twist. Kang was the distraction. Kang's war across time, his variants, his dynasty, it's all noise. All leading to a final moment where we realize Kang was never the threat. He was the warning. A failed god, a broken tyrant. And as he falls, Doom rises. Now this is where Marvel can take the opportunity to finally introduce a clean narrative handoff. Kang's final act, whatever shape it takes in Doomsday, becomes the doorway through which Doom walks into power. And when the Avengers finally confront Doom, it won't feel like the end of a saga. It will feel like the start of something worse. Because Doom is not chaotic like Kang. He's not unpredictable like Thanos. He's methodical, patient. He builds his empire with consent, not coercion. He doesn't erase people, he offers them a place on Battleworld. Now let's imagine the setting. Picture this. A fractured planet stitched together from shards of collapsed realities. New York floating beside Wakanda. Parts of Asgard fused with Xandar. A city from Earth, 838, embedded into the ruins of nowhere. Every fragment holding survivors. Some aware of what happened. Some living in blissful ignorance. This is Battleworld. Not just a battleground. A living museum of the multiverse. And Doom. Its curator. Its God. And where does that leave our heroes? Scattered. Broken. Some captured. Some corrupted. Others rallying a resistance, trying to find each other, trying to remember what reality even used to look like. And that's the story of Secret Wars. A war for memory. A war for identity. A war not just between heroes and villains, but between versions of heroes. Peter versus Peter. Steve versus Steve. Wanda versus Wanda. Lines blurred, morality bent, stakes raised beyond comprehension. Now imagine what it does to Reed Richards. The smartest man alive. The eternal fixer. The man who always has a solution. And yet, he couldn't stop Doom. He couldn't protect his family. He couldn't even warn the Avengers in time. That moment, when Reed sees Sue and Franklin standing beside Doom in full allegiance, will be the single most devastating moment in the entire MCU. No amount of logic will shield him. No invention will undo that. He is forced to confront the one failure he cannot fix, the loss of love. And maybe that's why he becomes the key. Because for all his intellect, Reed's greatest gift is his humanity. And when the battle reaches its climax and Franklin hesitates, torn between the power Doom gave him and the love he feels but no longer remembers, it won't be a weapon that sways him. It will be a story. A memory Reed holds on to. A bedtime story. A photo. A lullaby. A tiny human fragment that survived the collapse. And that will be the chisel that cracks the illusion. Because while Doom offers control, Reed offers connection. One is unshakable certainty. The other is vulnerable, chaotic love. And if Franklin chooses that, chooses truth over comfort, it will shatter Battleworld. That's your climax. Not a giant beam of energy. Not a CGI explosion. But a child choosing love. And what does Doom do then? He doesn't scream. He doesn't rage. He just stops. Because deep down, he always knew this moment was coming. That his paradise was fragile. That the boy he tried to mold into a god would eventually become human again. And maybe, just maybe, that's the moment Doom vanishes. No death. No explosion. Just gone. Like a dream ending. Because for all his might, Doom is still a man. A man who tried to rebuild the multiverse in his image and lost. Now, let's look ahead. What does this set up? The possibilities are endless. For one, the multiverse is now permanently fractured. Not destroyed, but unlocked. We don't go back to one sacred timeline. Instead, we embrace the chaos. Heroes from different realities now coexist. Wolverine from Earth 10005 walks beside Deadpool from 616. Miles Morales finds himself in the same universe as Tom Holland's Peter. Characters long dead in one timeline are now alive in another. That opens the door to stories unlike anything we've seen. Not reboots, not retcons, expansions. And more importantly, the audience gets to choose. We're no longer bound by continuity. We're freed by possibility. This also sets the stage for a new kind of Avengers team. One that isn't defined by location, but by legacy. A multiversal coalition. Carol Danvers, Shuri, Shang-Chi. Kate Bishop, X-23, Strange. America Chavez. And maybe even an older Franklin Richards, back from wherever he disappeared to after Battleworld collapsed, shaped by what he saw. A new team, a new threat, a new saga. And who might that next threat be? It doesn't have to be another villain. What if the next saga is about repairing the multiverse? About finding lost fragments and restoring balance? About seeking out universes where threats are emerging before they spread? Think cosmic peacekeepers, reality healers, architects of existence. And at the edge of it all, Victor Von Doom, still watching, still waiting, still believing it should have worked. That's how you plant seeds. That's how you make a character like Doom timeless. Not by killing him, but by letting him linger. Because here's the thing, Doom is not Thanos. He's not Kang. He's not even Magneto. Doom is inevitability. Not the kind that snaps fingers, but the kind that whispers, I can do it better. And when that voice returns years from now, it'll feel like destiny. So if you walked out of Fantastic Four wondering what that short, strange, mid-credit scene meant, wonder no more. It meant everything. It meant the MCU is back. It meant the game is changing. It meant that Robert Downey Jr. didn't come back just for nostalgia. He came back to play the most dangerous character in the Marvel Universe. A man not driven by greed or conquest, but by purpose. Victor Von Doom. And the moment he knelt before Franklin Richards, mask in hand, hand on his shoulder, he wasn't just entering the room. He was rewriting it. Because this isn't just the Fantastic Four story. This is the dawn of Doomsday. And when the dust settles, when Battleworld crumbles and the timelines scatter, one truth will remain. Doom didn't lose. He taught them. He made them better. He made them ready. So the next time a god shows up, they won't bow. They'll remember Doom, and they'll stand. Because that's the real legacy of Victor Von Doom. Not destruction, clarity. And now, it begins.